I'm Spencer. This is the Dopesick show. Just got back from judo, so kind of a mess. But this channel is going to be a mix of a few different wild things that connect together in my life. I did 5 years in federal prison for drug-related charges. I'm from Virginia, so I was sent to a federal prison in Virginia that pedophiles get sent to from all over the country. When they get stabbed or beat up in California or Texas, they get sent to Petersburg. 40% or plus of the population of prisoners in Petersburg were sex offenders. So I had to be surrounded by those type of people for 5 years. You'd be surprised how the guards catered to them and things that went on in that prison. I'm going to expose all that. So if you're a guard, if you're a lieutenant, you're not going to be too happy with me. I'm on the other side now. I am a judo brown belt now under Tarek Monair. He's a former Olympian, coached the U.S. team. I am a blue belt under Paulo Santana. He's world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's incredible. I train twice daily. It's what works for me. Some people go to meetings and eat a whole bunch of pies afterwards. Me, I train judo and train jiu-jitsu. I get beat up and beat a few people up too. It's taken a lot of whoopings, but steadily making progress in it. Martial arts and in the streets situations and people talking about, would this work in the street? Would that work in the street? I saw countless fights in federal prison, so I have a different type of insight towards that. And prior to federal prison, I spent 2 years on bond. Now, I did some unusual things. You know, most people would just party or freak out. I took a college class on corrections with people who were wanting to be probation officers, people who were wanting to be police officers, because I wanted to see what they were taught on how to handle and how to treat prisoners. And I'd actually done a year in jail before I got out on bond. And when the teacher went around the class and asked what each person wanted to do with the class, what they wanted it to do for them, I said, well, actually, I've seen things from a different perspective. And she said, well, hopefully not the other side of the bars. And I said, yeah. And simultaneously, 30 people all turned and looked at me pretty seriously. I learned a lot of things in there about what they're taught on how to treat people, and it would blow your mind. I want to expose a lot of that too. Now, I also did Kempo karate. I read each website, martial arts website, and it claimed to be street lethal, and it was not sport. It was just too deadly. So it seemed right. It seemed like it would be a good thing. So I trained open to close 6 days a week. 1 day a week we did basic grappling, very basic grappling. I'm going to talk a lot about how self-defense sequences, role-play martial arts, throw a punch half speed, and then I do some kind of sequence where I chop your neck and kick you in the nuts. How that didn't really work out for me, but my basic one-stripe white belt jiu-jitsu level saved me every single time. Also, all these guys that look big, bad, and tough, the baddest thing about most of them is their breath in terms of can they fight or not. Now, they are bad. They might stab you and they might do something awful like that. But in terms of hand-to-hand combat, most of these guys that look like they are bad are absolutely terrible at fighting. 95+% of fights ended in a standing clinch after a few punches were thrown. And usually a minute later, both guys gassed out and just quit. So I thought, standing clinch. Judo seems like it'd be really good from there. And then for the ground, obviously, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the best thing for that. And also boxing. Boxing has regular sparring where you get hit hard. Getting hit in the face hard and not freezing up or freaking out is a skill in itself. It is as important as knowing how to throw a punch. Knowing how to get sucker punched, not lose your composure, and be able to return an attack without freaking out is a skill in itself. And so when I was in prison, I read George St. Pierre's book. And he talked about rather than learn from a jack of all trades, he mixed his own martial arts. Sought out John Danaher for his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, who's the best coach on the planet in Jiu-Jitsu. He sought out Phil Nurse and John Charles Skarbowski in Muay Thai, Freddie Roach for boxing. He trained wrestling with, I think it was the Canadian national team. And he learned from the best in each martial art, and he mixed his own martial arts. That seemed really cool to me. So rather than go to a mixed martial arts gym and just become mediocre from a guy who's pretty decent at each thing, I'll go to the best. I drive twice a week, 2.5 hours each way to do class, a 2-hour private lesson, and hang out alone in the gym until evening class to do another class. So about 5 hours of training each day on Tuesday and Friday with Paulo. Paulo was my first coach. Now, I met Paulo because in the federal system, you can get sent anywhere. So if you get in trouble in Virginia, you get caught with a cell phone or you stab somebody, for instance. In federal prison, they can send you to California, to Texas. They can do whatever they want. And they do it as punishment so your family can't see you. So it really hurts your family as much as you, and it's kind of sick how they do that. Well, the closest halfway house, which you are required to go to a halfway house upon release from federal prison, and it actually counts as time off your sentence. So if you're sentenced to 5 years, when you get to 4 years and 6 months, they will release you to a halfway house. It's very controlled, very restricted, but through some finagling, through some help of friends, I got to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from the very start. After I'd been in the halfway house for probably about 3 weeks, from the very first day, I trained class, a 2-hour private lesson, and hung out in the gym alone until evening class, and I did that 5 days a week. And it was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm from Roanoke, Virginia. It's over 2.5 hours away, the trip. So, but while living in Winston-Salem, I was able to do it every day of the week. After moving, different jiu-jitsu coaches that I trained with, I mean, they were good, but it's kind of like when you get the best from the very start, it's hard to go back to somebody who's mediocre or less than. So judo was the best thing around here that we had. We had Tariq. Tariq is incredible. He was on the Egyptian Olympic team, coached the U.S. team. So I started judo, and I just trained judo for a few years. After an accident where I broke my ankle, I got to thinking, well, Winston-Salem isn't that far away. It's doable to drive there and back and train a couple times a week. So I've managed to be back training with Paulo for probably about 6 or 7 months now. The judo has been tremendous. Judo and jiu-jitsu are an incredible combination. I love both of them, and both of my coaches would hate that I say this, but like it's true. Judo on a technical level is not as sophisticated as jiu-jitsu on the ground. Go figure. Standing up, though, it is absolutely phenomenal. Jiu-jitsu is incredible on the ground, but almost every school does little to no takedowns, and the takedowns they do, for the most part, are poor. So, by training judo with Tariq and jiu-jitsu with Paulo, even though I'm just pretty good standing in judo, pretty good on the ground in jiu-jitsu, I am a killer on the ground in judo, and I am a killer standing in jiu-jitsu. So by training with each of the best in each one, I mixed my own martial arts, and it's worked. In competition, did 3 competitions in 6 weeks. The first one I did, and then did one 3 weeks later, then one 3 weeks after that. I won 2 of them, gi and no gi, and then the third one, it was only in the gi, and I lost that one. So every person in the first 2 competitions, I was able to take down using a judo throw. And judo throws land you in side control. Wrestling, usually you put a risk for getting caught in a headlock type choke, or in somebody's close guard, guillotine, Doris, anaconda chokes. Or if you take them down with single, double leg, you're probably going to end up in half or full guard. But in judo, you end up in a side pin. That's almost always with hip and leg techniques. That's how it works. Judo has a heavy emphasis on pins too. A lot of people don't know this, but 20 seconds of holding a pin is a win in judo. You only get 20 seconds of time to work though. So you have 20 seconds to scramble to try to get a pin. A pin is side control, mount, north-south. Back control, surprisingly, is no points. I have some problems with their rules with that. So some people just go to turtle and stall out from there, which I think is completely ridiculous, especially from a self-defense perspective. But anyway, this channel is going to be a lot of exposing Petersburg and how the pedophiles are catered to there. It's going to be about martial arts. It's also going to be a lot about addiction and how it is a disease. You have people who were born with a silver spoon in their mouth that are down and out addicts that lose every penny they have. You have people that grew up in poverty that are addicts. It affects everybody. It's a disease, and when you know how to treat it as a disease, it's a lot easier to deal with. The biggest thing is replacing one addiction for another. For me, that was judo and jiu-jitsu. I believe anybody can find a replacement addiction and change their life. That is just something I fully stand behind. I believe just living a normal, mediocre life when you're used to hustling, going back and forth, living insanity, to drying out off drugs, alcohol, whatever, and sitting on a couch alone at the house, that's just miserable. It rarely ever works, and if it does, it's not for a long time. This is what works for me. I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about, I was a drug dealer. I sold a good bit of drugs, and I know a lot about how it's cut, how it's re-rocked, all of that, and I want to expose how people are dying off fentanyl. There's certain reasons for that, and I can explain it pretty well. I can explain a lot of the things that could help parents, that could help addicts. I do talks with kids, talks with rehabs, and it's about giving back. I don't get anything out of it. I speak to try to help people, because you get a lot of bad juju, a lot of bad karma for the stuff that you do, and you realize bad stuff keeps happening to you. When you do some good stuff just for the sake of doing something good, doing something nice for people, it seems like it comes back on you. It's something I believe in. It might sound silly, it might sound mystical or stupid to some people. It's just something that I believe. But anyway, there will be different topics. There will be a lot of prison stories. A lot of them will be very entertaining. I was friends with a serial killer who killed a cop and got away with it. And he's doing time for shooting 2 FBI agents. And he's actually going to be released in a couple years. He'll be in his 80s, but he'll get out and he'll get free. And I have some interesting stories about gang members, a Caribbean drug lord, and how he had to send his cousin as collateral to the Colombians for 500 kilos of cocaine. And a lot of the stuff that happens in prison that you wonder about, does it happen? Does it not happen? And just day-to-day life in there and all that type of thing. So it's a crazy mix of ADD going in a tornado of prison, martial arts, and and addiction. So if you're into any of those things, I guarantee I'm going to have some interesting stuff that you like. I'm going to try to categorize it. I'm technologically challenged, we'll just say that. So we'll try to put it in playlists, so then whatever you're into, you can find just that and not get any of the other BS that you might find not interesting. Well, that's the first video. From there, I'll try to do another one every 2 to 3 days. This is the Dopesick Show.